This week on Nevada Week, 2 years have passed since the police killing of George Floyd. His murder by a Minneapolis police officer sparked protests, some of which were violent, both nationwide and right here in Las Vegas. Protesters demanding changes in policing in communities of color. Now, a new program in Southern Nevada aims to strengthen local law enforcement's relationship with the Black community.
Support for Nevada Week is provided by Senator William H. Hernstadt and additional supporting sponsors.
Welcome to Nevada Week. I'm Amber Renee Dixon. The Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department Foundation, a nonprofit that raises money for Metro Police programs and initiatives, launched the Black Giving Circle in February. The purpose of the Black Giving Circle is to, quote, forge and strengthen relationships between the Southern Nevada Black community and local law enforcement, unquote. Well, that prompted Nevada Week to ask, what is the state of relations between Metro Police and the local African American community? Joining us to talk about that and the Black Giving Circle are Captain Carlos Hank, who oversees Metro's Internal Oversight and Constitutional Policing Bureau, Tom Kovac, Executive Director of the LVMPD Foundation, Pastor MJ Ivy of Kinship Community Church, and Erica Washington, Executive Director of Make It Work Nevada. Thank you all for being here. Mr. Kovac, I will start with you. What was behind the formation of the Black Giving Circle?
So the LVMPD Foundation exists to support the police department and public safety. And as we are looking at a lot of the programs we fund, a lot of the activity is taking place in areas of town where there are high populations of people of color. And when we looked at a lot of our supporter base, we recognized that it didn't necessarily reflect the communities that our officers were serving and our funding was predominantly supporting. And we wanted to change that. We wanted to give communities of color, and particularly the Black community, the opportunity to have engagement with the police department in positive ways, and also the opportunity to really take greater ownership in their own public safety.
Am I understanding correctly that you weren't getting enough funding in areas of color? Is that what you're saying, for programs specifically for those areas?
No, what I'm saying is that the population that we were serving, the police department was serving through our funding, didn't necessarily is seen in the population that was primarily donating to us. And we felt there was a disconnect. And it wasn't just donating, it was engaging. And so the Black Giving Circle gives the people who are participating, members of the Black community, community leaders, business owners, the opportunity not only to contribute financially, but also the opportunity to volunteer, to be mentors, to engage with officers, to help engage with youth, because that's one of the primary targets of the community engagement work the police department does, as well as have an opportunity to network and socialize with like-minded people, all in the name of advancing public safety.
Captain Hank, what was the need for the Black Giving Circle?
From the aspect of a bureau captain who served on the west side of Las Vegas at Bolden Area Command, the opportunity to forge those relationships, as Tom alluded to, of having specific members of the community that are people of color contribute to the LVMPD Foundation, forge those relationships, and specifically mentor and partner with specific groups or entities in that community, so that they can see that their funding going to that specific organization to help them. I believe that's kind of like how the program works, or is going to work. And I believe it's off to a pretty good start to this point. It's important because as the programs, say Bolden Area Command, community-oriented policing section, they do an event about every 3 days. Over 100 events a year, from Cops and Curls, Easter in the 106, Santa in the 106, Bolden Little League, Bolden Lions soccer team, all of these different events that we have that go on the west side of Las Vegas need a conduit and need to engage with the community to have that mentorship and that sponsorship to engage them and continue to expand those programs to have more inclusion and more dialogue between the community and the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department.
Am I correct in that most of these programs are focused on the youth and having youth interact with police officers so that they're growing up knowing these aren't people here to hurt me, they're here to help me?
Well, I would say that would be specifically a very pointed reason why we would want to have that engagement, because the elephant in the room is relationships is everything. The ability to bring and come alongside a youngster and allow them to see police aren't that bad. The police are actually good people. They're coaches, they're mentors. We have some of the coaches for the Bolton Little League where those officers serve in the same community which they police, and they respond to calls in that community. Those kids see those police officers on a daily basis. They engage with them. Without that conduit, without that seeing, they would have that perception that the police are not there to help, but because they have that personal relationship, that breaks down the barrier, allows that communication to occur, and it helps us reduce crime in the area. It helps us provide the services that we need, that the citizens need, in a more effective and efficient way.
Erica, with Make It Work Nevada, you work with women of color to address the issues that women of color are facing. Mothers of color often worry about the safety of their children in the presence of police officers sometimes. Why is that, and how effective do you think this Black Giving Circle could be in that area?
You know, I'm not really sure. So I've done a little research, and I've been on the website and looked at all of the possible programs and things that can come from it. But my main concern is that where you have high crime, where you have a lot of marginalized folks, the income level is low. 89106, the average, the median income is $28,000 a year. So I think the problem is less about a relationship between the community and police officers, but resources that need to be made available to folks who live in marginalized communities. And so I'm not exactly sure that it makes the most sense that we're asking folks to donate more money to create more programming for there to be a better relationship between Metro and young people. I think that there are some obvious changes that need to be made within police departments, but there's more than that. We need resources. We need to be able to open the parks. You need to be able to have sidewalks and crosswalks. You need to have high-performing schools. You need to have after-school programs, summer programs that are free or affordable for the children. And those things, I think, are how we start to lift folks into another realm. But when they only see destitute, and they only see cops, and they only see crime, and they only see folks being harassed or arrested or what have you, that doesn't lead to thinking about a brighter day. I think there are just other programs and ways that we can invest in our communities.
So perhaps instead of the money going to this foundation, if it went directly to the people living there, you think that would be more worthwhile than in funding police programs to interact with the community? How would that improve police relations, or would it make it not necessary to even do that work?
You know, I think in the long run, it makes it unnecessary if we actually invest in. I think when people, people talk about defund the police, and it's a very hot topic, and I think what people miss in that is it's not to say that all police are bad or anything like that. It's to say that, you know, if we take some of this money, this earmarked money for police officers or for and put these in the communities for actual resources and actual programming, long-term programming, not short-term, not just a season, but actually investing in folks from the time that they are born until the time that they are well into their 30s. You know, I think that we can see some positive change, but we have to have that long-term investment, and we have to really try to figure out how we change we change people's circumstances and their environment, because an environment is only as good as the folks that are in the community. And I think communities, you know, a lot of communities, even Marble Manor and other places, you'll see community in those spaces. You know, it might be known as a high crime area or what have you, but you'll see community. You see people who actually take pride and care about their surroundings, and they want more space and time to be able to do that. And I don't think they have it at this point.
Pastor Ivy, what do you think about what you've heard of the Black Giving Circle?
Well, I think we need to stop putting folks within a boundary line. We have over 300,000 black folks, and they all can't be on the west side. This is impossible. They're on every side of the southern Nevada, period. We've got to make sure that black kids and children see the relationships that we have on the east side just as strong as the west side, as they see complete west in Summerlin all the way over. Same thing with Moapa Valley. There are African Americans everywhere. If we stop putting ourselves in segregation, we'll probably see some improvements as well. But I agree with her, Ms. Erica was Washington as well. We got to normalize the society that we live in. A sidewalk means a lot. See, a sidewalk where I come from means you could do hopscotch, means you could pass somebody and say hello. It meant that that's a neighborhood and it belonged to somebody. Driveways, things of those sorts are normal. And then when you have a section of society, white folks or people with money that have it, and then you have a society that doesn't, you're creating problems, situations. So I can agree, let's put some money where it needs to be, but also education is the most important thing throughout this whole process. When you have education in the sense that I know I can be a police officer and I can pass the test, or I can be an ambulance, or I can be a teacher, or I can be the mayor of Las Vegas, make sure we give them every aspect. I just don't want them to have relationships with police officers. I want them to have relationships with every professional service that we have in this city. We're a great city. We're a great location. I love being here. Been here 19 years, and I'm not going anywhere else. But we've got to do better at making sure that the relationship between the police department is one that is symbolic, that it's simple, that we have relationships back and forth. But let's make sure we're doing it on every side of the city, not just on one side.
The Black Giving Circle, how equitable is it in where you physically direct your resources or have your programs? Are they specifically kind of in a certain area of Las Vegas, the west side, for example?
Well, the program is new, so our intention is for it to grow as widely as it needs to grow. We're starting where the need is greatest, which is in the Bolden Area Command, the west side. And we've actually seen some pretty significant improvements in the types of programs that the Black Giving Circle is investing in. So the captain referenced the Bolden Little League. That program has been in existence now for several years. And when the police department did an analysis of violent crime in the neighborhood around where the practices are held and the games are played, we saw a year-over-year drop in violent crime by 86% in the year after the league had started. So it gets to more than just developing the relationship between police and the community. It does start to address the more basic human needs that both of you brought up, in that we are creating a safer environment. And one of the things that we saw during the pandemic was a realization, I think, by a lot of people that as we started to prioritize what we were calling basic human needs, the pandemic created a greater need for food and a greater need for healthcare and a greater need for shelter. We also believe we saw a greater need for public safety, in so much as if someone doesn't feel safe leaving their house, they're less likely to go get vaccinated, or they're less likely to go try to get a job. And so we see this need, this balance that you referenced, to support these programs, because not only are they going to create stronger relationships, but they're also going to help open doors and create greater opportunity for, in this case, the youth of the Little League. They're going to live in a safer neighborhood because of, in part, this baseball league.
Captain Hank, what do you believe the state of relations are between local law enforcement and the African American community here in Southern Nevada?
I think the state of relations is very strong. As the former captain of Bolden Area Command, I had a very robust coalition of people from all walks of life, black, white, didn't matter what the rainbow of people that we had in Bolden Area Command. And just for transparency here, the west side of Las Vegas is transforming. So you have I think it's about 37% of it is now black. And so you have other folks that are moving in. We have a large Hispanic population there. All of them need to be safe. All of them need to be policed fair, firmly, and consistently. And another topic I would like to touch on is when we establish these coalitions and we have these meetings, it lends us to the opportunity to have discussions about the things that she brought up about how that neighborhood needs to be safer. They need we'll have like community leaders like Brian Knudsen, Cedric Creer that have attended those meetings, and they can hear what the community members need, and they bring those topics up, and they can then take those up and make movements in those areas to help those entities help themselves and provide the infrastructure that they need. Another thing that was brought up during the pandemic was the identification of the access to broadband and Wi-Fi. Through our Bolden Coalition, we made some partnerships with some Cox Communication and some other entities there, where we were able to provide, and it came from our meeting there, bringing everyone together and bringing up the concerns that we're able to provide that access to Wi-Fi, so those kids could get those Chromebooks, could use the Wi-Fi, could do their homework, and increase their chances to have a good education through distance learning.
That's a good example of this program working outside of just a policing aspect, getting involved in education, like Pastor Ivy had mentioned.
Exactly, and the LVMPD Foundation doesn't have a border. So the other area commands, Summerlin Area Command, Southeast Area Command, Enterprise Area Command, they all have community programs. We're looking at Bolden Area Command, but they have black, white, Hispanic children in those programs also. There's a hockey league on the south end of town. There's a lot of different programs that we have to help youth restore their faith in policing, restore their trust in policing, but also grow as people, grow as human beings, be mentored by officers, by community members, and have a broad range of experiences to grow them as productive members of society.
Erica Washington, what do you believe this state of relations to be among the local African American community and police?
So what we've seen, we recently at Make It Work Nevada, we went out to a couple of different parts of town and we just talked to folks. It was around the DA's race and whether or not people knew that the race was coming up and how they felt. And if the person was in front of them, what would they say? And every single person that my team talked to had a question about equity when it came to policing, when it came to whether or not it was equity with how they are treated compared to other races, or whether there was equity when a police officer did something wrong and when are they prosecuted for the same crimes and things of that nature. So I think there is still a lot of discontent within the community when it comes to talking about Metro. And again, I think that all of these programs are good. I think it's a great idea to have the Little League Baseball or hockey and all of those things. I just don't necessarily think they have a direct connection with policing or really strengthening and building trust, because the trust has to start at the root, and the root of the problem is not, how well folks play together or that kids don't know who that cop is. It comes from, policing being done differently. I think it comes from having an opportunity for the community to really say that, hey, we don't feel safe when police come around because of the history. And it's not just here in Las Vegas, it's obviously across the country, but it's its own pandemic. And I think that the Giving Circle has probably some good bones, but I think that it could be done where in a different manner that actually would create resources for folks. And I think that creating those resources and just doing that would be great. I don't think that we have to include police officers, hanging out with the kids all the time as the way. That's not going to really change folks' circumstances.
Captain Hank, when Metro has a use of force case, you are the guy that's in charge of investigating it. You head that bureau. The most recent 5-year use of force report from Metro, that was from 2016 to 2020, it showed that in that time period, Metro was more likely to use force against Black people than any other single race or ethnicity. That data said the subjects in about 40% of Metro's non-deadly use of force cases were Black. Yet, African Americans make up just about 12% of Clark County's population. What does that indicate to you about Metro's current relationship with the local African American community?
Well, one thing I like to state is when we use force, race is not the first thing that we're looking at. So we, one, put our cops in where crime is occurring. We're looking at analytical data. We have a section that we're looking at robberies. We're looking at the different things that impact the quality of life of our community. And then we put our police officers in those particular areas to address crime in those areas. We have had, and we acknowledge, we have had higher uses of forces on people of color. However, what I believe the data shows is my section, the Critical Incident Review Team, the Office of Internal Oversight, reviews those critical incidents, review those uses of forces, and those folks, to ensure that the police officers use force appropriately, and they're held accountable if they did not use force appropriately. But race is not the focal point of the officers, when they go out to enforce the laws. What draws our attention is whoever the person or that subject that is creating the problem in the community or that is breaking the law, that's the subject that we're going to, based upon analytical data, that's the person we're going to go after. In a critical incident where there's an officer-involved shooting, we have a process that has been very robust and has been revered around the country. Our critical incident review process from the time that trigger is pulled or that use of force has been used, we have a review process from the criminal side, whether or not the officer used an appropriate level of force and it was within law, and then whether or not they used the appropriate tactics to de-escalate the situation, whether they pre-planned, communicated effectively, how it's a 360-degree review of that circumstance to determine if our officers were effective in employing the policies and the training that we encourage them to do.
I think it's important to note that in 2020, according to that report, 58% of subjects involved in an officer-involved shooting were white, 21% were Black. That is more reflective of the makeup of the population of Clark County. But Pastor Ivey, I know you want to say something.
Yeah, let me jump in here. The reality is the extreme that we're talking about, that Captain Hank is talking about, is shooting. But we still live in everyday lives. There's not a shooting every day in this one neighborhood or that neighborhood or in this street or that street. It's policing when it comes to regular traffic stops, being pulled over, being looked at a criminal. I'm Black. I've been Black a long time. And when I realized that at the age of 16, I was pulled over in a 280ZX, and the first thing he asked me was, whose car is it? Well, what makes you think it's not mine? What makes you think that I don't have the ability to have and get? It was mine, flat out, completely. But the mentality is, you're Black, you don't need to have it. You're Black, you don't need to be in this neighborhood. Why are you here? I am 50 years old. When a light goes on behind me, I still get apprehension. That's because I have gone through these non-violent, non-issues. No one's pulled out a gun, no one said anything. But when an officer tells you to get out of a car and pulls a gun on you because you were speeding, that's it. That's a minor incident. That is not a felony. It wasn't felonious. And those are the issues that we're talking about every day that happen. Someone walks across the street, they went against the light. They're homeless. And by the way, I've been homeless. I was homeless 6 years ago. And I have been to and seen where people have worked and tried to strive, but they're being pushed back because someone that has a uniform takes it. You cannot police the police in morality. That's a morality issue. When a person gets out and sees you and says you are a threat at 6'2", 250, there's nothing I can do to change it until you just talk him down. So we have had to do what George Floyd's situation, you saw a number of people talking down the police. That is not something that just occurred in George Floyd. It happens consistently, that we have to take people who are wearing a uniform and are amped up and calm them down because they feel empowered because they have a gun, a badge, and the ability to take someone's life.
Captain Hank, we have 30 seconds, but I know you have your own personal experience with law enforcement as a young man.
Yes, I have, but I think the most important thing here is to understand that Metro is doing everything it can to identify and train our officers in implicit bias, racial profiling. Since Assembly Bill 478, we have done immense training. We were doing this way before that Assembly Bill. We've been the trailblazers of putting it out there that Metro is, we're not going out there with an intent to harm or to injure anyone. It's a matter of respect and dignity, and our officers go out there every day to encourage, we encourage them to make that relationship with the citizens every day at each contact. And it takes us to stay focused and create these relationships in order to do so.
Thank you all for your time, and thank you for joining us on Nevada Week. For any of the resources discussed in this show, go to our website, vegaspbs.org/Nevada Week.